Hello, if you're watching one of my videos for the very first time, my name is Adrienne and I am a public school teacher turned homeschool mom who loves to share tips and tricks for other homeschooling moms, ways to empower their kids and creating a stable and healthy environment. I love to share tips on living toxin free as well. That's a whole nother channel. This video, I'm going to talk about questions. Having questions, answering questions. If you've been around a child for, 30 seconds, you probably realize that they are full of questions. And I am quick to answer questions, but I want to challenge you to think about things a little bit differently. I want you to stop answering every single question that your child has. That's super freeing to think about, isn't it? You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything. I know that when we were growing up, our generation was kind of your parent knows everything and don't question them. And times are definitely changed. Times have definitely changed, but you don't want your child to think that you have all the answers and that they just have to get to that point. You want to show them like how to find their answers, and what better way to do that than in the home, where you can guide them through that process and help them understand what's a good source and a bad source, and something that we don't really believe in and something that we do believe in. So it's quite a process, and I would really encourage you to just stop. I know it's so much easier to just give them an answer. Lots of things in life are just easier if you just do it, right? If your kid's struggling doing something, it's just easier. Here, let me do it. But they're not going to learn anything when you do that, other than the fact that mom has to do everything, or dad has to do everything, or so-and-so has to do everything for me. That's not a healthy way to be, or a healthy thing for them to develop. Kind of this learned helplessness is definitely not what we want our kids to have, right? I want mine to be self-sufficient. I want them to be independent. I want them to be critical thinkers. So if I'm constantly answering every question that pops into their head, they're not going to be able to develop those skills because I've taken that from them. So it's okay to let your kids wonder, and it's okay to wonder together. There's tons of times where my daughter will ask me a question and I'll say, that's a really good question. I've never thought of it that way, or I've never really thought about that question. Let's figure it out together. And then you can guide your kids in what you do when you have a question. Maybe it's pull up the internet. Maybe it's open up the Bible. Maybe it's go through your prior knowledge, something that you go to first, and you can actually verbalize that for them and help them understand where you come up with some of your answers. So it's not just mommy or daddy is just picking this idea out from a hat. Like there's a reason, there's a foundation there for why we answer things the way we do, or why we believe what we do. There's lots of different questions that you can encounter. Again, any small time that you spend with a child, it's a no-brainer, right? It gives you that opportunity to show them that they can think critically and they can solve problems themselves without the help of someone else. They are able to answer their own questions. And once they figure that out, and as they get older, it'll be such a lifesaver for you to know that you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to answer all of their questions, that you want them to kind of wonder and kind of chew on things and kind of think about things before they blurt out a question or an answer or anything like that. So it's really kind of like front loading. You're doing a lot of work ahead of time, but the blessings and things are going to repay that time in abundance later on, once your children are able to develop these critical thinking skills and be able to solve their own problems and become more independent. When I was teaching, it was very difficult to use critical thinking in the classroom because I had so many students, 20 to 30 kids in a class, and it's one of me. I didn't have an aide or an assistant or anything, or a volunteer. So it was just me, and I couldn't get to the point where I could get them all on the same page. They were developmentally different all over the board in different areas. So it was very challenging to get them to think critically. And oftentimes many teachers, unfortunately, just resort to spoon feeding, where they give the students time, and I was guilty of this as an elementary teacher. You give the students time to work on it, and then after a set number of minutes, we go over all the answers as a class, and you call on different students to answer, and that way they kind of check their papers, fill in the gaps that they don't have. But that's really spoon feeding them. You're just telling them the answers. You're not showing them where to get the answers. You're not showing them how you got them. And some students would actually wait and just copy down all the answers at the end. So you're not really teaching a whole lot either. So I just want to encourage you to think of it as a time investment. You're investing in your kids. Yes, it is a lot of work. Yes, it's going to be exhausting to explain even further than just the answer, but it's not your quick fix. And it's going to repay itself in the future when they're able to think critically and answer their own questions. It's also important for me that my kids know that no one on earth knows everything. Everyone started at some point and they had to get certain skills or certain knowledge from somewhere else. Like, you're not born a genius. You might be born predisposed to certain things. Things might come easier to you than others, but even people who are really great at something, they have to work at it. They have to practice. They have to improve some kind of way. It just doesn't magically happen overnight, to my knowledge. Maybe there's somebody out there that can prove me wrong. I'd love to hear that story. So you want to teach your kids to be independent, to be critical thinkers, to seek answers themselves instead of just asking mom or dad or their teacher or whoever. Teach them. I want to teach my girls to pray for wisdom like Solomon did in the Bible, because wisdom helps you with so many things. It helps you with discernment. It helps you with knowing what to say and when and how to make certain decisions. Wisdom is a great thing to have and a great thing to seek, especially if you can instill that in your kids at a young age. I just think that would be awesome. If your children are old enough, you also can take this into a whole nother level and talk about discernment and things like maybe arguing with your 2-year-old sister about who's right or whose toy that is isn't the best use of your time and energy right now. Or maybe that friend that you have isn't really a great influence on you. Or maybe you could be investing in someone else who's going to be more authentic with you and love you just for you and not put all these stipulations and parameters on your time together, or maybe require you to have a certain toy or wear certain clothing or whatever. Helping them to understand that they can discern and make choices in their life to get a better life out of it is a huge skill, very complex, very abstract. There's plenty of adults still working on that. It's kind of a lifelong thing, but I think the earlier we can start showing them these things, the better. And you're also teaching them to use their resources. Maybe you don't like going straight online and just typing in a question. Maybe there's certain resources that you would like them to check first. We would prefer our girls to seek biblical wisdom before they go onto Google to type a question, because the answers are going to be a little different. And if they can't find it in the Bible, we have some other places that we'd like them to check first. And you also want to talk about a great source, like a reputable source. Obviously, Wikipedia is not a great source because anybody can post in there. And depending on when they post and when it's checked, you could be getting information that's not really been verified by anyone. Teach them to use good resources, great resources. You also want to model kind of wrestling with questions, your own questions and your own lifestyle choices. I don't know this answer, or the Bible isn't clear about this, so we just have to pray and trust that God knows best. Maybe you want to say something like, this is something that I know is important and is good for us, but it's still hard and it's still going to be an adjustment. Those kind of conversations to let them know that it's okay for them to be a little uncertain or uneasy or uncomfortable, depending on what you're talking about. So those are good skills to start developing when they're at home, when you are readily available there to help supervise and chaperone them and kind of guide them, shepherd them in a healthy direction. I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you some value. Stop answering their questions right away and give them time to wonder and ponder and think about things on their own to help develop those critical thinking skills.